Hello, Internet! I'm Elliot the Purple-Haired Doofus, and welcome to Buddy Reads, where I read a small selection of a book and review it for you. Today we are continuing our journey through Wzard and Glass by Stephen King, and we are finishing the first story. I hope that you have finished it yourself because I do not want to ruin anything for you. And as always, I'm going to get a little spoilery. Where we had left off, Blaine had just crashed, and our heroes had just started to climb out of the train. They are sitting on top of the wreckage when they look around and they see signs that they are in Kansas. And they are modern signs, well, modern by our standards. Roland looks around and he says, "Oh dear Susan," before he passes out, or nearly passes out. And everyone asks him what that was about, and he says, "I will tell you later." And he says, "I believe we are in the Thinny." And everyone's like, "What in the world is a Thinny?" And he says it's an area of the universe where it's kind of like the walls between worlds get thin and it starts to affect you. And so all four of them slowly get down off Blaine and begin walking. And they notice that they can't see the beam anymore. And the beam is the kind of directional compass towards the tower. They've lost it completely. And so Roland says that they have to continue walking and find the beam again. They walk towards the train station where they believe will be roads and civilization. Once they get to the train station, they find a bunch of dead bodies, mummified bodies, dried dead bodies that have been dead for a long time. And while Roland, Eddie, and Susanna are looking into the train station, Jake asks if anyone has a quarter. Everyone turns around to see him looking at a newspaper box. Don't even know what they're called. But it just kind of shows how innocent Jake is, because he's here in this world where no one is alive and no one would care, and he doesn't think to just break the glass and take newspaper. Eddie does though, and that's what they do. And they open up the newspaper and they read this story about this virus called the super flu going around and killing everybody. How it's basically like, this is how our world became a dystopian world. Susanna points out the date at the corner of the newspaper, and it says, I believe it was 1986, which doesn't really make any sense because Roland grabbed Eddie from 1987, and the world that Eddie came from wasn't like this. So that's when they realize that this world isn't exactly like the world that they left. This isn't their Kansas. It's kind of Sliders-esque, I guess, where it's like an alternate version of their world. Before they leave the train station, Eddie says that he wants to check out the handicapped area. Although he doesn't use the word handicapped. Everyone's asking what he's looking for, and he's looking for a new wheelchair for Susanna because they lost the old one when they hopped on Blaine. And they're able to find one, and it's a great step forward for them. They continue walking and they get to the zoo, and you find that all of the animals in the zoo were affected by the super flu as well, because they're all just kind of lying around dead. And Eddie starts talking about this thing that he used to do with his friends in his world called turnpiking. And it's basically where all of his friends got together and put names in a hat. Whoever name was pulled stayed sober, while everyone else got drunk or blitzed out of their mind on drugs or just, high as a kite. And the sober one took them driving and guided them on a journey. So Roland's like, I kind of like that. We'll just call what we're doing turnpiking. They get to a on-ramp to the turnpike and they come across some graffiti, and it's like, watch out for the walking dude, or all hail the Crimson King, or just a little eye symbol. And it's very kind of ominous because Stephen King doesn't describe what any of that means. They continue to walk on, and the Thinny, again, not my word, starts to affect them. They start to hear strange things, so Roland pulls out a couple of bullets and he sticks them in his ears, and he offers other bullets to the others, and Eddie says, "No, I've got my own bullets." Roland says they won't work. You have to use these bullets, because supposedly the bullets from Roland's world would work more than Eddie's world, but we're not supposed to be in either of their worlds, so I don't understand how he knows that. But they all concede and they put the bullets in their ears, and they're not hearing weird stuff anymore, and they're not affected by it anymore. And they continue walking, and they come across a silhouette off in the distance of this very tall building. Eddie and Susanna ask Roland what it is, and Roland's like, I don't even want to look at it. He says, we'll know when we get closer. Eddie and Susanna are like, come on, just humor us for a bit, tell us what it is. And he's like, we'll know when we get closer. And then they all sit down, and Susanna asks about Susan, which was the name that Roland cried before he nearly fainted. And Roland takes a sigh and he says, I know I promised to tell you that story, but I'm not ready to tell you that story. I promise to tell you that story tomorrow night. And so everyone else is like, okay, tomorrow night, we'll be ready. Eddie goes down that night and he dreams about a bulldozer destroying the rose that Jake had come across in the previous book. And then he wakes up and Roland asks if he had nightmares, and he kind of pesters Eddie until he tells him what the nightmare was about. And Eddie has to be reassured that Roland isn't going to hurt his team or his pact in any way. And Roland says, of course not. And the reason that he needs this done is because Eddie dreamed that Roland was driving the bulldozer. They wake up the next day and they get a little closer to that building, and it's described as being all glass. I'm starting to think that that is the titular glass of the book, Wzard and Glass. They get to the end of that day, closer to the glass, and Roland sits down to start his tale that he promised he would tell. And it starts with him going back and kind of recounting all of the story that he's already told before about defeating Court in battle and becoming a man. And then he says, here's one part that I never told any of you. I went to a whorehouse. I had sex with a woman. And after we were done, my dad burst in and he threatened me. I shot my father. His last breath was giving me advice not to go back to town, to go my own separate way, and to go with my friends. And I'm noticing that none of this has anything to do with a woman named Susan. But that is the end of our section for today. So the next story is called Susan. So we will finally be starting the story of his childhood, which I wasn't really looking forward to. But honestly, if all they're going to be doing is walking through a desolate wasteland of nobody, where they're not going to meet anyone new because they all died of the super flu, maybe it's best that he tell this tale while they're walking along. I would love to know your thoughts on what is going on. Leave them down in the comments if you have any, if you haven't read it yet, or if you have anything to say that won't spoil the future of the series for me. Put it down in the comments. Like what you thought might have happened so far in this book that may or might not have turned out to be wrong. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and give me a like. And if you want to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I've been Elliot, the Purple-Haired Doofus. This has been Buddy Reads, reminding you to watch your pajama radius. And I will see you all in the next section of Wzard and Glass by Stephen King. Toodles!